The Treasury Department saying that the U.S. will hit a cap on how much money it can actually borrow as soon as tomorrow. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says that she can use extraordinary measures to pay the bills, but only until June.
So Republicans are remaining steadfast. They are not going to budge, they say, in their refusal to raise the debt ceiling unless Congress and the White House agree to deep spending cuts that the Republicans want.
Well, it's that time again. It hasn't even been a month since Republicans took control of the House, and they're already threatening to shut down the government unless Joe Biden gives them their way. But what they don't want to admit is that Republican spending is what got us into this mess.
Let's get to the bottom line here. Those who are posing for holy pictures as budget balancers, the MAGA Republicans, should note one important fact. Almost 25% of all of the national debt accumulated over the history of the United States, 230 years, was accumulated during the 4 years of Donald Trump. So the notion that there is some partisan holy position that they're taking and that they're going to fight this battle for the matter of principle. When they enacted tax cuts for the wealthiest people of America during the Trump administration, they added dramatically to the national debt, which we are now facing.
That was Senator Dick Durbin with some inconvenient math for the GOP. And he's right. Over $8 trillion of our national debt, a full quarter of all the debt incurred by our country since George Washington, came from MAGA Republicans spending like drunken sailors during Donald Trump's presidency. And what did they buy with all that money? Tax cuts.
If the Republicans had not pushed just two things, the Republican tax cuts that went mostly to those at the very top and the biggest corporations, and hollowing out the IRS specifically so they could not hold wealthy tax cheats accountable, wouldn't be able to audit them. If those two things had not happened, then we wouldn't even hit the debt ceiling at any time during the first Biden administration.
Now, besides making me wonder why Dick Durbin is leading Democratic messaging on this instead of Liz Warren, there's a lot to unpack here. 60% of the Trump tax cut found its way into the pockets of the richest 20% of Americans. And by slashing the corporate tax rate by 40%, it also starved the government of revenue it needed to, function. And here's the thing. For all their bluster about supercharging the economy, Trump's big tax giveaway didn't even work. A study 2 years after the tax cut found that the federal tax revenues plummeted and working families ended up worse off. In fact, only two groups had life get better under the Trump tax giveaway: millionaires and megacorporations. But as Elizabeth Warren points out, Republicans are now creating a manufactured crisis to distract from the real issue, that Republicans' pointless and destructive tax cuts are pushing the country to the brink of its first ever bankruptcy.
And the real issue at stake here is who's going to pay to run this government. The Republicans are real clear on that, not the rich folks. The first thing they have done after they took over the House is they wanted to pass a bill to make it easier for wealthy tax cheats to get away with it. And they're now going to put forward a proposal to put a 30% nationwide sales tax in place.
Yeah, those anti-tax Republicans, they're only anti-tax when it comes to taxing the rich. Faced with a bankruptcy and a government shutdown, Republicans want to institute a national sales tax on everything from baby formula to groceries to the rent you pay your multimillionaire landlord. And that's a tax that disproportionately hurts low-income people. But the GOP is just fine with that. But let's get back to the debt ceiling, Washington's worst dramatic production. Republicans like to pretend that raising the debt ceiling would spell the end of America's creditworthiness. In fact, they say plunging the whole government into darkness is better than raising the debt ceiling by $1. So the GOP has never voted to raise the debt ceiling, right? Wrong.
They were fine with raising the debt ceiling when Donald Trump was president. In fact, the Republicans voted 3 times to raise the debt ceiling. In the 4 years of the Trump administration, no muss, no fuss, just get it done. But once we've got a Democrat in the White House, now no, they don't want to raise the debt ceiling. They want to create as much economic chaos as they can and keep offering tax cuts to their rich buddies. So I think that's the political dynamics of what's going on here.
Republicans voted to raise the debt ceiling 3 times in 4 years. and never once threatened to shut down the government over it. But things are different when Democrats are in power, and sadly, only Elizabeth Warren seems to be out there actually telling this story in a way people can understand. If only Democrats had some kind of Democratic National Committee to help Warren spread the word. But remember, this whole argument isn't actually about the debt ceiling at all. It's about forcing Democrats to accept painful spending cuts that will hurt American families, tank the economy, and make us less safe. It's about putting Joe Biden in an impossible position ahead of the 2024 election. With Republicans, it's always about politics over country.
We believe there ought to be specific, concrete limits on spending attached to a debt ceiling increase.
We have to go through debt ceiling. We're going to have to figure out a way to cut our spending, curtail our spending, because we're living well beyond our means.
We're coming up against a debt ceiling vote, and what that's going to mean, that might be the first test of how committed the Republican Party in the House is to really holding the line on spending. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're not wrong on that.
Okay, we get it. Spend less. Great. We can start by ending the Trump tax cuts. But Republicans say they won't agree to that. Okay, what about cutting America's massive defense budget? The GOP won't agree to that either. In fact, there's only one major area Republicans say they want to cut: Social Security and Medicare. And Republicans have a surprise ally in their fight to push Democrats on Social Security and Medicare cuts: Democratic Senator and coal baron Joe Manchin. Manchin proposed launching some fiscal commissions to examine mandatory spending like Medicare, an idea he's been working on with Senators Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell. Don't say I didn't warn you. Republicans feel emboldened by their victory in the House, and now they're willing to shut down the government in order to force disastrous cuts on America's most cherished social programs. If they succeed, tens of millions of Americans will suffer, and Democrats will look like traitors to the people who had their backs in 2022. Joe Biden should make one thing clear: Democrats won't negotiate with financial terrorists. If you made it to the end, thanks so much for watching. Please leave a like and consider subscribing. And leave a comment below so you can let me know what I should cover next.